The Giants entered last night's game against the Padres with just 29 games remaining, clinging to a half-game lead over the final playoff spot in the National League. And so needless to say, an emphatic win over San Diego, which improved their position to a game up on a playoff spot. It was huge.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there if you have not already. And please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're listening or watching the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get 200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And where we get started is basically, I'm just going to quickly remind you of what I just said, which is that last night's game was huge. Every game from here on out is huge. And now we are in the month of September. We're going to have expanded roster starting today, 2 extra roster spots. So it'll be fascinating to see who they add. We've also got Tristan Beck making another start. And so suddenly the Giants have 4 guys making regular turns in the rotation with Webb, Cobb, Kyle Harrison, and Tristan Beck. And then last night, Jacob Junis and Sean Manaea. Manaea, I thought, was fortunate to get out of that outing unscathed. He wasn't at his best. But nevertheless, the Giants had an emphatic win. And every win, doesn't really matter how it happens at this point, is huge. A lot of teams were off, so the Giants gained a half a game on a lot of teams, including the idle D-backs. And so the Giants have a 1-game lead over a playoff spot entering September with 28 games remaining. So anyway, with all of that said, this is going to be part 2 of my conversation with Javier Reyes from Locked On Padres. It was a totally fun conversation, so you're not going to want to miss it. Part 1 was yesterday. And what we're going to go over next are the reasons why speculating about why the heck has this star-studded Padres team struggled so much, and we saw it last night. He predicted basically the type of game that we saw last night. He said Dementors had sucked the soul out of them. That's how they play, and that's kind of what it looked like last night. And we're going to talk about what do the Giants do better than the Padres, not just on the field, but off the field. Mental health, nutrition, that kind of stuff. And then also we get a good laugh about Gary Sanchez for a reason that I'll save for later, that you'll listen to later. So anyway, without further delay, part 2 of my conversation with Javier from Locked On Padres.
Yeah, I mean, I do think you're touching on something, though. And I think that it's one of those things that throws stat people for a loop. Anybody who forgets to stat people just in general is that there isn't a concrete boom. That's what it is. Now, there are some things, if you wanted to dive deep, Machado was swinging a lot of pitches and was a little bit over aggressive. Okay, you could bring that up, but the hard hit stuff is still there. You could bring up with Bogaerts that ever since he got hit on the hands or the wrist, and he's had a wrist injury for a long time, including when he was good with the Red Sox, gets hit with a 98 mile per hour fastball by Spencer Strider there. And ever since there, 98 WRC plus. That leads to some other questions, such as why has he never been placed on the IL or at the minimum just been given more DH days or put at the bottom of the order? Because look at what happened with Trey Turner. That guy got put in 8th spot, and then his fans cheered him, and now he's a superstar again. Must be nice.
Former Padre. Also,
former Padre.
Exactly.
Former
he's
Padre.
When I say good to great, I mean, he's the guy.
Yeah, he's the top one.
That
yeah.
Come
Rizzo.
on. I mean, you could have
bring up
had Trey
Rizzo
Turner,
too,
but no.
honestly. You
And
could
what
bring
was
up
the
Rizzo
return?
too.
I mean,
For Rizzo?
yeah, Rizzo. No, for
Rizzo
Trey
was
Turner.
for Trey Turner. Will Myers. My boy. My boy.
Oh my god. See, that's I don't know,
It's
man. There's
just,
something to that to me.
I think there's something to be said for this idea of mercenary, and you can't track it with numbers, but the fact that guys are all meeting each other a little bit for the first time, or it's just big personalities. And I know people talk about this with the NBA and the egos, but it could happen in baseball too. And sometimes it doesn't matter. Your team back in the day with Jeff Kent and Barry Bonds, those guys literally wanted to kill each other every day, and it didn't matter. They played very well together, right? So like, it doesn't all. It's harder to track. I think in baseball is what I'm getting at. But I mean, you bring up a good point. I mean, Tatis isn't technically homegrown, but he's like the closest they have, absent Campuzano. And I count Tatis as mostly homegrown. They traded for him when he was like 12 years old. Like that, it's basically the same thing. But in the grand scheme of things, it's like, yeah, I remember last year that Mackenzie Gore was the only one that they had that was homegrown. And I think that's what's been my thing overall. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, guys. But
Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer that you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
And we're back, everybody, here on the Locked On Padres podcast, vibing and thriving, just pushing through, despite my team driving me insane and everything. Of course, check out both Locked On Giants and whatnot, and Locked On Padres on the SiriusXM app. All platforms, you know what it is. And I don't know what it is when it comes to the Padres, and that's what we've been talking about, that there's no clear answer. Runners in scoring position and high leverage, as we've talked about before, not necessarily areas that are easily predictable. You know what I mean? Like this isn't football where it's like, oh, what's Kirk Cousins going to do? Yep, he's going to throw an interception. What's Jimmy Garoppolo going to do? Or the NBA, oh, let me guess, James Harden's going to blow it in the postseason. It's not like that. For baseball, it's like you can have moments and players can be outliers, like genuinely like extremely clutch. You can bring up your Ortizes of the world. You can bring up your the entire Giants team from the 2010s, apparently, right? Like just those guys are built different. But in general, it's a hard thing to track. So when you look at this, I see something that's like with team building and the mercenary aspect, I have no issue with basically any deal that the Padres have made, at least as long as I've been hosting the podcast. But the key is that I don't have an issue with them individually. I think that they've done too much at once. And that's the only thing I could come up with. If you're going to do Bogarts in the summer, maybe you don't want to, also extend Manny Machado and trade for Juan Soto. If you trade for Juan Soto, maybe you don't want to give a big contract to Xander Bogaerts and extend Manny Machado and extend Yu Darvish and extend Robert Suarez and extend Jake Cronenworth. See, I practically gave Ben a headache just saying all of that. I don't think that any of their moves individually are awful. That's so weird about them. It's that they've done them all at once. They've blown up the farm. And if there's anything impressive is the fact that they're still able to make these trades because they keep finding guys, right? Like they put a lot into their scouting department. AJ Preller is a scout at heart. Like all of a sudden their farm system's looking all right. They have this Ethan Salas kid who's one of the most talked about prospects in the league because he's like 17 years old, like a double A already. So they've done that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's almost like right before they get there, they trade those guys. And this is more than when people, you probably get these comments that are like, well, these are known quantity players. That's why you trade your prospects for them. I agree 100%. However, this goes back to my not all at once thing. We already have a Tatis and Machado. I don't think you need to do more stars. I'm a proponent of it. You should be spending money. The Giants tried to this offseason because they know. I think that as well. But when you already have a Tatis and a Machado, or if you already have a Tatis, Machado, and Soto, I don't think you need to necessarily be going out to get another star. I think you got to build around the edges and bring up some young guys. And I think that the Giants know that really well. And they have a good culture. Like they have, a bunch of coaches that help players out. That's the closest I can get to. But it's just absolutely insane. If someone told you those stats that I told you about with the Giants, right? With their starting pitching being good as predicted, but their offense and sometimes occasionally their bullpen, aside from the Velociraptor guy you guys throw out in Duvall, like occasionally some weird stuff. You brought up Manaea, former Padre. It just speaks to an impatience. It speaks to a doing too much of something that I like at once, which is spending money. And I think that that's what's been the Padres' problem. It's the closest I've got.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the word culture, and I just have to wonder. It's one of those things that we don't necessarily get a firsthand look at. And so I just in this when there's a special case like this that seems to be something that's not just a one-off thing, I do wonder, like, what top to bottom, I feel like it's really important communication and a environment of supporting players, and helping them with whether it's nutrition or mental health or whatever. Giants have all that kind of stuff going, and they have each other's back, and they're always talking about how they just want to play for the next guy. And I mean, I don't follow the Padres nearly as closely as you do, so I don't know if that's kind of stuff that they talk about. They may talk about it, but I don't know that they. The fact that they're 0-11 in extra innings kind of tells me they're unable to play that team game this year, at least, where you're like advancing runners or whatever and just doing the little things that it takes to win. And the craziest thing to me is when you look at the run differential, because run differential really predictive,
Yeah.
and the Padres run differential is, let's see, it's one of the best in the National League. And let me just tell you, the Giants have scored 573 runs. The Padres have scored 602. The Giants have allowed 570 runs. The Padres have allowed 548. And so the Padres have scored more runs and allowed fewer runs on the season, and yet they are 7 wins worse than the Giants. And so I do think it all does really come down to, it could really just be as simple as a little bit of a luck factor. I mean, 6-22, like you said,
It's like right? Yeah.
if you're 14-14, that's 8 more wins, and you've got 70 wins. Like you said, if you're 70 wins, and that would put you as the number 3 wildcard team. And so, and imagine if you're a game or two above average in one-run games, then you're the top wildcard team or whatever. So really, to me, that's like one-run games, and games like today are a perfect illustration. It was a one-run game in favor of San Diego, and you've got your stud star closer on the mound, and you've got a cursed team on the other side, and you end up losing by 1 run on a Tommy Edman walk-off. Like you said, not known for his power. 2 Tommy Edman walk-offs, the other one not a homer, just a hit, against Hader in a row for 1-run losses. Insanity. I hope it continues with this upcoming series. But again, I'm not taking them lightly.
Yeah.
I'm not taking them lightly until there's a big fat E, meaning eliminated, next to their name.
It's just it's one of those things where I try to, the only positive you can say is, like you said, just like how much worse they've been in these situations. That tends to regress to the mean the following year. It sometimes goes the opposite way. So say if you're a super clutch team, You're going to go backwards. It depends. There's so many variables. If you have a great roster, injuries like the Atlanta Braves a few years ago, where it was like, hey, they got really clutch in the second half. Why didn't they get bad the next year? Well, because they had Acuna and the rest of their team hurt. That's why. That's what helps. But like, and then they added a little Matt Olson, right? Like that helps. But with the Padres, it's like you look at this and say, I guess that's the best case scenario. I mentioned the catchers, mentioned the starting pitching, which is a bit up in the air because the only main one people love and know that's going to be Joe Musgrove. And then you know, what's going on with, he's got some elbow apparently, so that makes me thrilled, of course, for a 37-year-old pitcher.
That they just extended. For reasons I'm not fully understanding of. You want to sign Darvish? No problem. Like the guy. If anyone pitched to his time, I don't know why you though. That's my thing with Padres. A rush, a right now, even though you're developing some really cool product. That's been my thing. Like, could you have just waited on Cronenworth? Did you have to do it now? Was someone banging at his door being like, we're all ready to offer him $300 million? Same thing for Machado. I get a little bit. Like, maybe they thought the Mets were going to come in. I mean, they tried to get Correa for a ton. But it's the only case to make for them. The cases to make is at least they've got an owner that's willing to spend. And that means a lot for the Padres, who have never spent ever. They would not pay Chase Headley $60 million back in the day after being the best player they'd had since like the Ken Caminiti, Tony Gwynn era, right? But, so that's a good thing. And then the fact that they still have all these stars. And you say, if they just go 14-14, then they might be in the playoffs. And they're a terrifying team. Are they disappointing? Sure. Because a lot of people, like we said, thought they'd win the division. But they are a terrifying wild card team. And we don't get to see it. And instead, everyone's like, Patrick Bailey's doing it? Like, what's going on here? There's a lot of people who are watching this season just so confused. Or I know the Marlins have fallen off. The Marlins have fallen off, but that's a good example of another team where people are like, they're better than the Padres? What's going on here? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. But that's where we're at. That's where we're at, and I'm jealous of the Giants because they seem to get something, whether it's Kapler, whether it's the hitting coaches, whether it's, like you alluded to, facilities for mental health, to training, to analytics. Maybe the Padres need to spread out their spending a little bit better into not just players and maybe not just scouting, but analytical departments and everything, because it's just not a coincidence. The only season, 2021 was the collapse. Well, what about 2020? Yeah, that was great. I appreciated it. It was lovely. Making fun of the Dodgers fan flex that they beat the series despite us losing our top two pitchers before the series started. But also that was a year where Jose Altuve was like the worst second baseman in baseball. So maybe we shouldn't read into the 2020 season too much, at least for going forward. 2019 also collapsed. 2018 signed Derek Hosmer. I'm going to leave it at that. Like, there's just a lot of overall failure despite the NLCS appearance last year and despite some great moments. Can I just say one more thing?
Absolutely, sir. Go for it.
So Gary Sanchez, you mentioned him as the rare exception where he's come in and performed better than he was in the past or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, you know where he was before joining the Padres this season?
He was with the New York Mets.
He was with the San Francisco Giants in their minor league. They signed him to a minor league deal.
That's right.
They cut him loose, and then he was with the Mets for a hot second.
Yeah,
and then he was with the Padres. So
I forgot about that.
My theory is that the reason he's doing well is because he spent some time with the Giants.
I mean, you're out of line, but you're right. You know what I mean? Like, that's such a good. I totally forgot about that.
He was with them several games in AAA.
I totally
before Bailey, and then Bailey came up, and they're like, "Okay, we don't need you." But
yeah,
they were seriously gonna. They were the team that signed him first when he was like unsigned in the offseason or whatever. I believe that's how it all played out. Is that he was unsigned all offseason, and then they picked him up on a minor league deal.
Wow!
Again, and that's why he's having success.
It's like the Anthony
welcome.
Mackie gif. You're out of line, but he's right. Like, it's just, I mean, there you go. I guess the only other one is Ha-Seong Kim, who we didn't talk about much on this podcast.
That guy's awesome.
He would be the only one to look out for this weekend. Not the only one, you know what I mean, in terms of just like high leverage stuff. He's been awesome. His numbers on, if you go look at Fangraphs, high leverage situations, he's been great. Great leadoff hitter, second most pitches per plate appearance among players in Major League Baseball. He's been awesome. He hits for more power. He steals bases. That guy's been awesome. Other than that, though,
I love that.
And then defense. He's an absolute beast. He might be the actual true 100% player that got better with the Padres. So after giving him some time, so maybe they can learn
to develop.
Yeah, maybe
he
they
did
can
not.
learn from
he
that.
Stunk in his first year.
Yeah,
he looked overmatched.
Inconsistent playing time, overmatched, couldn't keep up with the velocity. Year 2, average offensive player. That's all they needed because he was a great defender. And then this year, this year he's just unbelievable. I mean, he's what they thought they'd get from Xander Bogaerts.
As a fan, there's something about, I think, witnessing that and the development, and you feel attached. And there's this like love relationship with the player and the fans, and it's feel good. And maybe you don't get that with the big players and the big contracts comes big expectations, and maybe a little less of you just appreciate what they give as opposed to being mad at what they're not giving. Absolutely.
But I'm still looking forward to the series because I'm watching the Padres for comedic purposes at this point. I will 100% be DMing you if something ridiculous happens this weekend. I cannot wait. And I'm not making that up. I know people question if I watch the games. Oh, I do, because I'm a masochist at heart, but also because I genuinely think that there's some funny things to be found with disastrous things that happen your way. Once you like clear the hurdle, once you've accepted it, the stages of grief, when you get to this phase, it's actually kind of funny. And that's why I was laughing like a maniac as Tommy Edman walked it off. But Ben, do you have any final things you'd like to plug for the good people out there?
No.
Like, all right, folks. No, I know. It's just funny that you just nope, like just straight up. You heard him, folks. Looking forward to this weekend series. It's going to be a blast, and technically Thursday, Friday, whatever. You get my point. Looking forward to that. And until next time, guys, and until whenever these two teams face off, which is, hold on, is this the last time we play each other?
I think there's one more.
I think there's one more. There's got to be one more.
Second to last series of the year.
Okay, cool.
Cool. I think it's also in San Diego.
Cool. We'll check back in
San
there.
Francisco.
We'll see what happens. San Francisco? Okay, San Francisco. Yep. So we'll see what happens then. But until next time, everybody, thank you for listening to the podcast. You can follow me at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, Ben at Ben Kaspick, on Twitter for both of us, at @L_Padres for me, at Locked On Giants on Twitter, Locked On Giants on YouTube, Locked On Padres. You get it already. Until next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies, and stay gregarious. I was trying to do the double G thing. Gregarious Giants. I don't know. First word that came to mind. We'll see you next time, guys. Take care.